Hello, I'm Robin Mitchell, and we're in my studio in Mid-City, Los Angeles. I live in Santa Monica, and I come to my studio every day to work. I love to be making art, to be painting, to be here, and my studio is a very special place for me. How did I come to be an artist and be here today to talk to you in this space? I think I've been an artist my whole life, but my understanding of being an artist has changed throughout my life. My mother is an artist, and I came home every day from school to see my mother painting in front of a canvas. And my earliest memory is my mother taking me to an art exhibition and having a dream about it. So I've always been immersed in art. My mom was wonderful about art, books, culture, and providing that for my sister and I, and going to see art all the time, seeing art, growing up around books, and really having an appreciation for that, the kind of things that she instilled in me. But when I always had really wonderful examples. In high school, my art teachers were inspirational to me, and there were always actually women who were artists who set an example for me of a direction to go in. When I was in high school, this great teacher who remained a friend throughout my life. When I went to college, wonderful teachers, wonderful friends that were there. Going to college, and the first college that I went to was California State University at Northridge. It was like going out in the world for me, and it was a whole diversity about what art could be. And my continual education was opportunities of meeting with other people, students and teachers, who really brought different ideas about what it was to be an artist, and different knowledge about art, and different ways of making art for me that just kept opening and expanding my world for me. I went to Cal State Northridge. I transferred to UCLA, and UCLA was a whole different kind of experience, and there I worked in the art library, which was profound. And I then transferred to the brand new California Institute of the Arts in Valencia. I was part of the first year of students at their brand new campus. It was an extraordinary experience. I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree and was part of the feminist art program there, a very special experiment in education, and I stayed on to get my Master of Fine Arts degree. I loved school. I always loved school, and it was wonderful. And I knew, because I loved school so much, that I wanted to teach and support myself as an artist by being a teacher. I'm influenced by lots of different things. I'm an avid reader, and I'm an avid art book collector. When I was in college, I worked in the art library, and it was an incredible experience. It instilled a love of books, and when I got out of college, I worked in art bookstores. And I have a wonderful collection of art books that I look at all the time. During the pandemic, one of my treats has been I've taken a book every day and I go through it and rediscover what was in that book, what did that artist do, what was in that embroidery that influenced me, and it's been very exciting. So I'm always looking, I'm always adding to my book collection. I look at books, I listen to music. I love looking at art. I love going to art galleries. I love going to museums. It's really hard not to be able to freely have access to that all the time now. And those things feed me, and they feed me and encourage me to work. They feed me to where my work is developing. I also see my own development. I've been making art long enough now to see patterns in my work. And I think of my development as an artist kind of like a spiral. And I see myself coming around and kind of coming near where I was before, but not quite. But I've changed, the world's changed, and I see things differently. And I might pull on elements that I've used in other work. And maybe something that was minor becomes full and large. Maybe it becomes more predominant. Maybe colors set me off. All kinds of things influence me. The paintings that I'm working in currently are part of a large body of work that I've been exploring for about 10 years now. I did a series of small abstracted landscapes, and I took those images and I scanned them, put them in Photoshop. I mirrored them and mirrored them again, just experimenting. The question of how an artist can use a computer is quite diverse, and this gave me an opportunity to create some new images out of old images I had done. Those images suggested to me some really interesting things that dealt with some ideas that I'm enthralled by. Symmetry. They had a sense of the natural world, but they also had a sense of man-made and more manipulated kind of elements. And I wanted to make paintings based on these images. I made a few digital prints, but I wanted to make paintings, and I was trying to figure out how to make the paintings. And then I realized that if I had made the original painting, I could then take the elements. I could take my canvas, make a mark on one side, make a mark on another, and I use those early digital images to make a series of paintings, and you'll see images here that take you kind of through a chronology of them. The images would evolve and change. In the beginning, they were mainly marks. I see myself very much as a mark maker rather than someone trying to create an illusion of a three-dimensional world on a two-dimensional surface. And those marks would often be suggestive of other things. And throughout my art making life, I've always been interested when something that I paint or draw can be suggestive of more than one thing. Maybe it looks like it could be an arm or an eye or a body part or a head or a flower or something else. And I liked when it had multiple possibilities in that. In the earliest paintings in this series, which I refer to as the Code series, because I thought of them as kind of like standing in for a language for something else, I took those elements and I felt over the years that I have moved into the paintings, that I got closer and closer, and elements that maybe had been very small in early ones or just a subset became more primary and began to become dominant in the later work. And those images began to evolve into, in the last few years, a rather central image that radiates out. I often work in many layers, and the layers build up and they have a contrast to one another, and in many of the paintings there has been now an overlay of little stitch-like brushstrokes. What happens, and you can see in the painting behind me, is that there's a strong optical kind of experience with them. I didn't know this would happen, but I was really intrigued when it did happen. This is a painting that's oil paint on canvas, and some of that experience is really physical, and you have to be in front of the work, and it gets a little diminished when you see it perhaps on film or when you see it in a photograph. But there's a constant kind of looking at it where some of the underlayers, your eye catches onto them, but then your eye catches onto the other part, and the overlay seems to radiate out from the center. It seems to pulse in and out, and then there are under elements and things change. Favorite areas for me are when colors might change and how they interact in areas versus other areas that are going on. And so that also intrigues me about the possibilities of what I paint underneath and how I build it on top. I may start painting with a really strong idea of what I want to move towards, but the experience of the painting always changes me, and it's different when I get to the end of it. And sometimes it takes me a little while to see, I know when it's done, but sometimes it takes me a little while to see what's really going on there. And I like to look at my work, keep it up for a while, to have experience with it, and to be able to go and look back through it. This year I had to move my studio, a studio I had for many years. The building was torn down to build a new high-tech complex, and I've moved to a new wonderful studio in January of 2020 that is much bigger than any studio I've ever had. It gives me wonderful space to work in, has incredible light, and I can really get back from my work. But moving also allowed me to re-examine a lot of the work I've done over the years and reconsider it. There were a lot of discoveries for me there. For me, during this pandemic, one of the silver lining for me has been the time to work. I come to my studio every afternoon. It's been a haven and a refuge. I can come from my house and not have any contact with people, and I come here and I have to admit I really escape the world, and I can go deep into my work. It's been an extraordinary creative experience, and a great place to work, and it's really resulted for me in a really very, very rich period in my art making. I often get asked who my favorite artists are, and I'm a real avidly interested in all aspects of the history of art, and there's different things that attract me to different artists, and some of it is inspiration, but often in very different ways. Some people looking at my work ask me if I was influenced by Aboriginal art, and I have to say I like Aboriginal art. I don't think I was influenced that much, but the thing about Aboriginal art that's so interesting to me is that for the Australian Aboriginals, they saw these visual images that they made as records for emotional, psychological, physical travel experiences. And I can relate to that in my own work. And so in that way, I can identify and line up with it. I often, as I said earlier, turn to a lot of my books. One of the artists that I really, really love is Hilma af Klint, hard to say her name, who really came to abstract art far before anyone else, but most people didn't know about her. And recently there was a big exhibition of her work at the Guggenheim, and I made a special trip to New York to go see it, went and saw it twice, and just astounding. And my highest praise that I can say to another artist is I wish I had made it. I was dealing with a lot of imagery that resembled her work before I ever knew about it, because I often think that it came from similar sources in her work. Really quite amazing. She was interested in the spiritual and the occult, and was trying to find a visual language in which she could explain things that she was philosophically attracted to. And the work is amazing. Also really affirming for me to see the exhibition, to see her work, was it kind of reinforced everything that I felt about art and my own art making. It was a real reaffirmation. I turn to all kinds of things for inspiration. This is a book on ancient maps, and early maps often have very little to do with geography, but are so incredible when it comes to the kind of imagery that's there. And so how do you do it? There is a whole world of Jain maps, Jain, that are the body represented as a world and turned into a map. These kind of images, I think, are such incredible ideas that they can't help but set off all kinds of inspiration. I find inspiration in many areas in many ways. There are many artists that I love, that I like historically. working that I don't know, and among my friends and my community of friends is really supportive and important. We talk about each other's art, have been supportive of each development, and talk about it in a language that often only we can share because we've had this experience. What I like about abstraction is the ineffable. For me, I can communicate, it communicates to me, and I can communicate through it beyond words. And if I was going to sum up kind of well, I see my work in the last few years, I'd have to do it physically. I see it very much as kind of giving and receiving, both from my work to me back into my work, the whole history of my work, and when I put it out into the world. Going and looking at art, I feel part of a dialogue with artists who've existed before me, artists who exist now, and I feel that my work in some way is responding to work that's out there. And I might be really quite influenced by an artist who does work that looks completely different than mine, because it may inspire me to ask myself questions that feed into the work.